Today I am creating the miniature pattern for this dress. I think it will be pretty easy. Follow on if you're interested. Let's go! We have a dress that is completely open on the back, and on the front there is a stripe of fabric that actually divides the left side of the bust from the right one. Now, to create the pattern for this dress, I will still build my bodice, the basic ones, mostly because on the front I have a dart on the skirt, actually two on the front, two pencils. So having the front of the bodice done will actually help me to understand where the darts will have to fall on the skirt. A small note: I know that you can create this without the basic bodice. However, let's start from the basics, because this helps, in my opinion, understanding the various distances. And I created the basic bodice using a scale ruler in scale 1 to 5. And after creating this basic one, I also created this, which is based on the measurement. I ensure that this is correct. So essentially, I will not need to recreate the whole pattern again, calculating, etc., etc. I will just have to measure the small pattern in scale 1 to 5, and then find the same measure on scale 1 to 2. I actually strongly recommend you get one of these anyway. They're great. I start tracing my center front line, which will be as long as the dress is. And then I trace a perpendicular line, which is where I will build the neck and the shoulder. Speaking of neck, this is the first thing I'm going to put on my pattern. I am drawing this line freehand, but there are tools to draw all the curved line of our pattern, so if you feel more comfortable, get one of those. After I trace my neckline, I also need to think how I will connect the turtleneck to the frontal stripe. And the best way to do this is actually, in my opinion, to add a little bit of shoulder. As I said before, because my pattern in 1 to 5 has correct measurement, I'm simply going to measure with my scaling ruler on the 1 to 5 side. I'm going to measure the various distances so that I can draw them on this new pattern. And I continue to replicate all the measurements from the small pattern into this bigger copy, tracing also the various lines. In this case, this is my bust line and this will be my waistline. Now, having traced this line, having my shoulder, my neck, etc., I am ready to start creating the frontal stripe, the central stripe that from the neck connects to the waist. And to do this, I really need to analyze both my sketch and the pattern that I created, because I need to understand how the curved line will smoothly go down towards the bust, curve towards the waistline, and then obviously go around in the back. Obviously, I have thought about this when I have created this 1 to 5 pattern, and what I did from the waistline, I lowered of about 3 centimeters. So you can call it pretty much the abdominal area. So we will need also another measurement, which is the abdominal circumference. The second thing that I need to do before creating this stripe is identify the frontal darts that are going to fall in my skirt. To be fair, I could do this even later on. However, I have a specific reference point where the stripe curves meet with the dart. If I want to respect that, I need to create the dart now so that the curve will pass through the exact point. And finally, after having created my abdominal line and my dart, I can proceed tracing this curved line that will connect the upper part to the skirt. And this took me a couple of attempts to draw this line smoothly, and I am connecting it to the abdominal line. The upper part is pretty much finished, so I'm moving on working to the skirt. To determine the skirt width, I obviously need to have my hip circumference, and because I'm working on a quarter in the pattern, I need to divide my hip circumference by 4. In this case, I have 110, including the fit already. And because this dress is actually quite adherent to the body, the fitting that I am adding is not that much. It's 2, maximum 3 centimeters. So going on, I close my rectangle, let's call it, because obviously I have traced my hip line, I have my abdominal line as well. So what I need to do now is creating the front dart of the skirt and also the curvature of the side of the skirt. Now, this has to be calculated because obviously we have at the moment only the largest width, which is the hip. My abdomen in this case has a circumference of 93, the hip is 110. So I have to subtract 93 from my 110, keeping in mind that the number that I will have from this subtraction will have to be divided by 4 because, again, I am working on a quarter. And a little thing I forgot. Obviously, my hip line is built on the hip, which usually is at 18 centimeters from the waistline. However, this model is for a tall person, so I will go with 20. And I move from the waistline, not from the abdominal line. Going back to what I was saying before, we need to build the darts of the skirt and also the side. So the number that we got before from our subtraction and further division can now be spread along. In this case, I have a total of 3.25, so I'll just do 330. I'm always going to take away the most from the side. So from the side, I will remove 2 centimeters and I will create a curved line. The rest, 1 centimeter and 3, I will spread it on the dart. About the dart length, the dart ends 5 centimeters before the hip line. So from the hip line, measure 5, trace a small dot, and that is the part where your darts end. Also, I don't draw darts straight, not on adherent skirts at least, but I always create a slightly oblique line. I just move off about 0.5 centimeters from the actual dart line. With that said, after I have completed the dart on the side, I proceed closing the skirt and I start creating also my back. Obviously, I trace the same lines, so my abdominal, my hip, and my bottom line. I already have them. I needed to do one last thing because from my sketch, the skirt doesn't fall straight. The skirt is actually a pencil skirt, so I need to remove some centimeters from the very bottom. And in this case, I think that 2-3 centimeters will be okay. So I remove 2 here from the front, and I will remove other 2 when I will going to build the back. Jumping forward a little bit, now that the front is completely finished, I add the margins. I usually add 1.5 on the size, etc., and 3 or 4 depend on the bottom. And I do this all over around. The only part where margins are not needed is along the center front line, because the pattern, once cut, will be placed on a double fabric, so we don't really need a margin because there won't be a cut on the front. Next is the back of the skirt. I have already the line traced, so I create my beautiful rectangle and I am ready to create my dart and my side. Now I was considering to create the back dart completely anew, but I have decided instead to create it at the same distance that the front dart is from the side. So that's what I'm gonna do, and let's hope for the best. Don't despair, we're almost at the end. One of the last things to do is understanding how to close the skirt. And obviously I will add a zip on the center back. Because of this, obviously, I will need a margin because the center back will be cut. Having decided this, I can go on, draw my margin all around, and I'm pretty much done. Like, to create the neck, it's literally a rectangle, so I will do that, adding obviously the margin to that as well. Obviously, to create the turtleneck, I will measure the neck circumference and I will ensure that it will fit within the front neck, obviously. And that's it pretty much. The pieces in total are 3, so we have 3 patterns, but we will have 4 pieces of fabric cut. 1 complete for the front, 2 for the skirt, the back skirt, and 1 turtleneck essentially. As everything is done, I proceed cutting my patterns, and the next thing that I will do, I will place them on fabric and sew them and finally see the final result. So we're all looking forward to that, I guess. Well, have a good day and see you soon.